I've been spending about 25 years now traveling around the country, reporting on religious and political movements, mostly within the US, sometimes abroad. And most of them not most of them, many of them are lovely, gorgeous movements of imagination. But many are fueled by the fear that left to sit can curdle into a kind of hate. And I think I can report accurately that the latter kind, the curdled kind, is growing. Some examples. A church called the Church of Glad Tidings in Yuba City, Oklahoma, which no longer displays the cross because the pastor told me now is a time of war, and where the pulpit is made of swords, and Tuesdays are for militia training. You may have seen a briefly viral video in which the church presented to General Mike Flynn a customized AR-15. with which he said he might go hunting in Washington. That was General Mike Flynn, briefly Trump 1's national security advisor, banished into the wilderness of QAnon, and restored more recently back to a position of Trump world influence, if not an administration position. Another church, Word of Faith Fellowship in Spindale, North Carolina, a church Trump celebrates for the ministry team it dispatched to hundreds of his rallies, understanding its religious mission to do all that it could for Trump, who it believed was selected for the presidency by God, that being its understanding of democracy. God chooses. I decided I would like to attend this church. That's not as easily done as you might think. 2 teams of security guards and SUV as I'm driving down the driveway this past December. 2 teams of security guards and SUVs sort of squealed up and cut off the driveway. It was just like an action movie. It would have been very exciting, except that it was real. And I thought, this is it, I'm not going to get in, and that's the best I can say this. And then when they started grilling me on my home church, I said I was a travel writer, which is true. I travel around, and wherever I am on Sunday, I usually go to a church to see what's happening in that community. But they asked me about my home church, and I said, well, the game is up, I'm Jewish. And I thought that was surely going to be the end of it. They had, they were like sort of Secret Service men with wires, and some conferring and talking. Send them down. I'm brought in. I'm put into the front place, and they are there. They say, as a Jew, I have a role to play in prophecy, and I am invited to pray with them to the God, their God, whom they call a God of war. They said, our God is a God of war. This is a curdling of hate, I think. Even more recently, On Fire Ministries in Spokane, Washington. Sunday before last, I attended services. It was actually, much of it was a lot of fun. It's a lively, diverse congregation. The music is fabulous. There's kids running around and dancing. And for some of these the boys, the church's pastor endorses combat training to prepare for the war with those he deems Marxists. And this is not figurative. He was a state legislator in Washington, 6-term state legislator in Republican leadership, until a report revealed his involvement or potential involvement, 3 armed events of political violence. He left the legislature and now does full-time church work, in which capacity he has developed a plan, and I'm quoting, to kill all males who don't submit to biblical law. They reassured me that that's in the future. I was fine. They knew who I was. Enjoy the music. There's plenty of time to submit. And the good news is that was too much for the Republican Party of Washington. He was pushed out of his leadership position. There are still lines. You can still cross them. And such churches remain exceptions. They are what we speak of as the fringe. But much of what I've been trying to do as a journalist, what I tried to do in this book, The Undertow, was to call our attention to the fringe. the way I understand a place is I go and I look at its margins, and I see where are its margins and where are they moving. One part of the undertow is dedicated to what, when I encountered it first in 2013, 2014, was called the men's rights movement, dedicated to the idea that men are the oppressed class in society, that men are actually the victims of sexual assault, not women. I said most groups are more interesting than their caricature. This one, their caricature was pretty dumb, and they were dumber. And I got there, and really they wanted to mainly complain about their ex-wives. They did not seem like a movement that would one day have one of its own, an icon of the manosphere, Andrew Tate, a man, an influencer, indicted, I believe, in Romania for sex trafficking, welcomed back to the United States by Trump, celebrated by high figures in Trump world. That fringe, that margin moves to the center. These churches about which I'm talking about, which remain fringe, but are worth paying attention to, because there are more of them. They're not at the center yet. That's the good news. You can still cross lines. But they are moving in that direction. And I would like, the good fight is the one you lose. We lose ground. We're losing ground right now, I believe. But the slow civil war that is the subtitle of my book is one in which we can be aware. This is why I want us to be aware, to be afraid of these churches so that we can, in our fear, find our courage. I think about the movement of these churches, and I want to tell you about one more in Nebraska. Lord of Hosts, a suburban megachurch with its own armed militia, where a church usher and a gunman in full tactical gear followed me into a public parking lot to tell me that as a journalist, I was automatically demonic. There was no longer a question of good journalists and bad journalists. I was a journalist. This has changed. For much of my writing life, it didn't matter how right-wing the church I went to was. It didn't matter. They looked me up, they knew who I was, and they say, "We know you're godless heathen, but it's okay. We'll talk to you, because through you, the good word will get out." So many of them believed. They said, well, you know, God believes in free speech, which, yeah, thank you, Chris, for looking up. No, that's not in the Bible, and no, he does not. But so many American churches, that was a different kind of Christian nationalism, was imagining that the First Amendment, what some churches call the God-breathed Constitution, it cut both ways. For a time, it meant, all right, we'll let the journalists in the door. This church did not. I was automatically demonic, no matter how polite I might pretend to be, and I had to leave. I had a notebook with me and a mechanical pencil. I always write with mechanical pencils, and I held up my pencil. And it was sort of ridiculous. A pencil, you click it and the lead kind of comes out and then it falls out. I was clicking the lead. Look, it's a pencil, to show its harmlessness. And I said to the usher, I said, he was backed up by this man in tactical gear with a gun, but the usher was in a jacket. And I said, I have only a pencil and you brought a man with a gun. And the gunman stepped forward and the usher grinned. And it was to me a very frightening smile. And he leaned in very close to ask, he says, how do you know I don't have a gun? This is new for me in American churches. How do you know I don't have a gun? And I think of this as, in some senses, one of the American questions right now. How do you know I don't have a gun? There are 400 million guns and counting in civilian hands in the United States. An awful lot of us have a gun. And in my time crisscrossing this country, thinking about how are you experiencing this moment, I encounter more and more people than I've seen in decades who say they're ready to use them, who practice and train and fly American flags in which the stripes are made up of long guns and the stars are replaced by handguns, or who fly American flags that show nothing at all The colors all gone to pure darkness. Not a black flag, it's an American flag. Catch the light a little bit, you can still see the shapes. This is a flag. If you see this flag, if you have a neighbor flying this flag, watch out. If you're flying this flag, please let me know now. It is like so much of the history of the far right. They attribute it to the Civil War. It's not really true, but that's okay. That's the legend that they have. They believe it comes from Stonewall Jackson, that it's a flag that stands for no mercy, take no prisoners, kill everybody, kill all males. It is a flag that brings to mind a verse, a battle verse that I encounter more and more as I travel around, Joshua 1:9, book of Joshua 1:9, which on its face is a pretty simple verse about having courage and going forth, but is understood and was understood for a long time as that, as a form of spiritual war. Spiritual war, which if you are a secular person sounds scary, but for a long time meant mainly personal struggle, to be a better person. In the same way that jihad sounds scary to some, but of course jihad means for most the same. Internal struggle. How do I be the person that I want to be? But we are in a time of metaphors that concretize, metaphors that become solid. And so that Joshua 1:9, for a long time you could buy from the merch store of Congresswoman Lauren Boebert's Shooter's Grill. Anyone know about Shooter's Grill? In the town of Rifle, Colorado. I mean, she's all in. Lauren Boebert is a far-right Trump congresswoman, and she opened a restaurant, and the idea, her theme restaurant, is it would be like Hooters, except that the waitresses, who would wear tight cut-off jean shorts, would open carry guns. Shooters, not Hooters. And their merch, this was a godly enterprise. Don't think this is profane. This was a godly enterprise. Their merch was all emblazoned with Joshua 1:9. Now, some of you may know the book of Joshua and may even understand how it has come to be used. How, for instance, on January 5th, 2021, there was a Jericho march around the Capitol. That God says to Joshua in this interpretation, go into the city and kill everybody. Kill everybody. So when I see Joshua 1:9 on a t-shirt, when I see Joshua 1:9 on a militia uniform, I understand that this is a different idea of what conflict is. I understand when I see that flag that stands for no mercy, that's a Joshua 1:9 flag. And I say, this flag is asking me a question. And if how do you know I don't have a gun is one American question, I think this is the Civil War question. This is a Civil War question.